Your heart is pounding, and you haven't even opened the email yet. You know the feeling. A notification lights up your screen. Your stomach tightens before you've read a single word. Whatever it says, your body has already decided this might be dangerous. But nothing in that email can actually hurt you. So why does your body react like something is stalking you through the grass? The honest answer is that a very old part of your brain doesn't know the difference between a predator and a bad email. And once you understand why, a lot of your everyday anxiety starts to make a strange kind of sense. Start with the basic wiring, because it wasn't designed for the world you're living in now. For most of human history, the single biggest threat to your survival wasn't a deadline or a difficult conversation. It was something that could physically kill you: a predator in the grass, a rival group, a fall, a snake. Missing one of those threats even once could end everything. So the brain evolved a system built entirely around one priority. Notice danger first, ask questions later. Research on threat perception has found that the human brain processes negative or threatening information faster than it processes positive information. Studies using brain imaging have shown that the amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure buried deep in the brain, responds to signs of danger before the more analytical parts of the brain even finish evaluating the situation. In practical terms, your brain reacts to a threat before you've consciously decided there is one. That's not a flaw. For most of human history, it was the entire point. A person who paused to calmly analyze a rustling bush before reacting was at a serious disadvantage compared to a person who jumped first and thought later. The ones who survived to pass on their genes were, overwhelmingly, the quick reactors. The calm analysts often didn't get a second chance to reconsider. So here's the problem. That exact system is still running inside you right now, in a world that almost never contains an actual predator. Your brain doesn't have a separate setting for physical danger and email from your boss. It has one alarm system, tuned by hundreds of thousands of years of evolution to treat anything unpredictable, unclear, or potentially threatening as a possible emergency. A vague message, an unexpected phone call, a silence after you've said something vulnerable. None of these can physically harm you, but your amygdala doesn't check for that distinction. It just fires. This is why a completely harmless situation can trigger a very real physical response. A faster heartbeat, tightened muscles, a stomach that suddenly feels unsettled. Your body is preparing you to run from a threat that was never there. Here's where it gets more specific and more useful to understand. Research on social rejection has found something that sounds almost too strange to be true. Studies using brain imaging have observed that social exclusion activates regions of the brain that overlap significantly with the regions activated by physical pain. In other words, being left out, ignored, or rejected doesn't just feel bad in some abstract emotional sense. Your brain processes it, at least partially, using the same machinery it uses for a physical injury. That single finding explains an enormous amount of modern suffering. Being excluded from a group chat, watching a message get read without a reply, noticing you weren't invited to something. None of these situations put your physical body at risk. But for nearly all of human history, being excluded from your group meant something close to a death sentence. A person cast out from their tribe lost access to food, protection, and everyone who might help them survive the next threat. Social exclusion wasn't just uncomfortable. It was, quite literally, one of the most dangerous things that could happen to a person. Your brain still treats it that way. Somewhere underneath the specific modern situation, your nervous system is running an ancient calculation. Alone means unsafe. This helps explain a strange modern habit that otherwise seems irrational: compulsively checking a phone for a reply. Research on social monitoring behavior has found that uncertainty about your standing within a group, even a small, low-stakes group like a group chat, can trigger repeated checking behavior similar in pattern to vigilance behavior seen in threat monitoring. You're not obsessively refreshing a screen because you're weak-willed. You're running a very old subroutine that treats unclear social status as a problem urgent enough to require constant checking, the same way an ancestor might have kept glancing back toward a tree line where something had rustled minutes earlier. There's a third piece to this, and it might be the most quietly disruptive of all. Research on decision-making has repeatedly found that losses feel psychologically heavier than equivalent gains. Losing money that you already have tends to feel worse than the pleasure of gaining that same amount. Losing an opportunity feels worse than the excitement of an equal opportunity gained. This pattern, sometimes described as loss aversion, shows up consistently across cultures and contexts in behavioral research. From a survival standpoint, this makes complete sense. A missed opportunity for food, in an ancient environment, was rarely fatal on its own. But an actual loss, a stored food supply raided, an injury, a missed warning about a predator, could be catastrophic. A brain that weighted potential losses more heavily than potential gains was a brain more likely to survive long enough to keep gathering resources. Caution around losses kept people alive. Optimism around gains, taken too far, sometimes got people killed. Now bring that forward into your actual life. A single piece of harsh feedback can outweigh 10 pieces of praise. Not because the praise wasn't genuine, but because your brain is built to weigh the negative information more heavily, treating it as more urgent and more important to remember. A single financial setback can dominate your thinking for days, long after several financial wins have quietly faded from memory. This isn't a personal weakness. It's an ancient system still running exactly as designed, applied to a modern world it was never built for. Put these three pieces together: a threat detection system that fires before conscious thought catches up, a social pain response nearly identical to physical pain, and a brain that weighs loss more heavily than gain. None of these systems know what year it is. None of them can tell the difference between a genuine emergency and an inbox notification. They were built for a world where hesitation could mean death, exclusion could mean starvation, and a single lost resource could be the difference between surviving winter and not. There's a fourth detail worth adding because it explains why the physical sensations feel so real even when you know, rationally, that nothing dangerous is happening. Research on the body's stress response has found that a sudden, unexpected stimulus, a loud noise, a flash of movement, an abrupt change, triggers a measurable physical reaction. A spike in heart rate, a surge of stress hormones, tensed muscles, all occurring within a fraction of a second. While before the brain's slower, more deliberate reasoning systems have time to evaluate whether the stimulus is actually a threat. This response evolved to handle sudden physical danger, a branch snapping nearby, a shape moving at the edge of vision. It doesn't distinguish between that and a phone buzzing unexpectedly on a table or a sudden loud notification sound in a quiet room. That's part of why the physical sensation of anxiety feels so convincing. Your body isn't imagining the racing heart or the tight chest. Those are real, measurable physiological events. What's mismatched isn't the reaction itself, but the target it's reacting to. That world mostly doesn't exist anymore for most people reading this. But the wiring never got the memo. This is why you can feel a genuine surge of anxiety from something as small as an unread message. Why a single critical comment can echo in your mind far longer than a dozen kind ones. Why being left out of something small can feel disproportionately painful. You're not overreacting in some broken, unusual way. You're running a very old, very effective survival system, aimed at threats that mostly don't exist in the form they used to. Understanding this doesn't make the feeling disappear. Your amygdala isn't going to stop firing just because you know why it fires. But there's something quietly useful in knowing that the racing heart before you open an email isn't a signal that something is actually wrong. It's an ancient alarm, doing exactly the job it was built to do, just aimed at the wrong target. Consider how many ordinary modern moments quietly trigger this same ancient machinery without you noticing the pattern. A presentation in front of coworkers activates threat circuitry shaped by a world where being watched by a group could mean being judged unfit to stay in it. A disagreement with a partner can trigger the same alertness once reserved for a genuine threat to your safety, because for most of human history, conflict within your small group carried real survival stakes. Even scrolling through a feed of other people's achievements can quietly activate comparison circuitry built for a world where your relative standing within a small group determined how much food, protection, and support you could count on. None of these modern situations are remotely close to a predator in the grass. But your nervous system doesn't grade threats on a curve based on century. It runs the same basic alarm, calibrated for stakes that mostly no longer apply, and it runs it with total conviction every single time. This is also why simply telling yourself to calm down rarely works in the moment. You're not arguing with a rational decision. You're trying to override a system that evolved specifically to act faster than reasoning can catch up to it. The slower, more deliberate parts of your brain, the ones capable of recognizing that an email genuinely cannot hurt you, come online after the alarm has already started ringing, not before. Your ancestors needed that alarm to survive. It kept their eyes on the grass, their ears tuned to sudden silence, their whole body ready to move the instant something felt wrong. You inherited that same alarm. You just live in a world that rings it constantly over things that were never actually predators to begin with. Your heart is pounding, and you still haven't opened the email. Somewhere behind that feeling is a very old, very loyal part of your brain, still doing the only job it has ever known, keeping watch for something in the grass. It's just never been told the hunt is over.